Otakuology Podcast with Otaku Mike Engine Graves.
Hey all, Jin here with the Otakuology Podcast, where we like to cover a lot of nerdy stuff. In today's episode, we are going to be covering the first episode of Over the Garden Wall, a miniseries created by Patrick McHale. This was made for Cartoon Network. It's one of their first original miniseries. So there's 10 episodes that we'll be covering. And this first one is actually called The Old Gristle Mill. The synopsis for this one is, while lost in the woods of the unknown, brothers Wirt and Greg run into a jaded old woodsman who warns them to beware of a beast. So as this episode starts, we kind of have one of the characters, which is this frog that's in the series, basically playing the piano and singing for us and everything. And it covers a lot of little scenes if you watch in these kind of opals that actually tell virtually about all the characters that we'll see and every episode that we will be watching and following up with. But as we go through all of these is when I will actually tell you what the beginning things actually were, what we've seen, and how they kind of play into each episode of what we're watching, as well as try and give you a little insight maybe to each episode if there's anything that happened that was wrong with it, or maybe some kind of inspiration per episode that we cover. So stay tuned. So let's get into the episode. On this first part, we kind of start out after the little scenes and everything. We have Greg and Wirt walking through the woods and not exactly knowing where they are or where they're going, besides trying to find their way back home. And nothing really looks familiar to them. And as they're walking, they find kind of they find the woodsman, which we will see later on here and there. And he is actually cutting up one of these trees that's very special. We'll cover that a little more later. But he's cutting up an edelwood tree and actually trying to get the oil and stuff out of it. It's got black sappy oil, so that's one of the things that's special kind of to this whole thing, and then being in the quote-unquote unknown. And then having him run off, basically, and not getting to ask directions and trying to figure out what they're going to do, where they're going to go. With doing this, and also having a bluebird actually start trying to talk to them and say, hey, I can help you with your journey. Let me help you with your journey. And just being amazed that there's actually a bird that's talking to them. So we have this part where they're talking to the bluebird, trying to figure all that stuff out. And we also have knowledge of something is kind of weird. Both of them are kind of wearing weird outfits, as well as Greg, the little brother, having candy in his pants and things like that. And we also see a little black turtle walking around, and Greg puts a piece of candy on his shell. Well, these turtles are also something special that are in the unknown. So it's kind of weird between the trees and the turtles and a few other things, how some of the stuff is actually portrayed. But while talking to the bluebird and everything, the woodsman hears them and actually comes back and tries to figure out and help them with what they need to do to leave and get back home. He tells them he's been wandering around the woods trying to find these edelwood trees, though. We do get this really nice scene. If anybody remembers Snow White, the whole part where she goes to the woods and then all the trees basically are personified, where they reach out and want to grab a hold of you, or they have faces and all this other stuff. And Snow White's running for her life and everything. She's scared. It's dark. Edelwood trees kind of have faces on them for a different reason than what we know, but as we will find out, there is actually a really dark mystery with that as we progress through this. But for right now, we have made it to the point where the woodsman has found this homestead that he's actually brought them into, and there's nobody there, which is where the name for the gristle mill comes from, or the grist mill comes from. And what we'll kind of play here, which this is a really good part as well. One of the things that I found out with this is the fact of, if you actually look at it, the wheel is going the wrong way compared to where the water should be running. And they had to do that basically for a scene that is coming up with a dog or a wolf kind of thing. But it's also something that they covered, saying that it had to be there for this thing that happens with that. So we have this whole part where the woodsman is trying to light a fire for them as well to keep them warm, and finds out that what his job is here right now is to cut down these edelwood trees, which he already tells them that they're hoard things, and he's trying to get the oil out of them for this special lantern supposedly that he has, which he brings up to a good point that we all have our own lanterns to bear, which does mean a lot here. And we do find out this little part later on where he actually took one of the twigs out and snapped it in half and threw it underneath one of the sofas, which will actually be brought up and shown later on again. But as of this whole part, the woodsman goes to actually cut the edelwood limbs down and everything for the oil. And Greg goes outside to play, and Wirt is kind of sitting there thinking, worrying about himself, and how he's embarrassed of events that happened leading up to this. We'll find out later on that actually episode 9 should have been episode 1 per se. But then we would know everything and why everything was going on besides the mystery of until we got to it. But we do have this whole part. We have this huge dog that comes in and scares the living daylights out of Greg with these bright eyes. And it's actually this kind of creepy looking wolf dog. This creature, whom they assume is the beast, comes in, tries to attack them, and really just wants all this candy that Greg has. So we kind of find out that this creature is after something that Greg left a trail of to the house, which we find out as well at the beginning of this episode that Wirt kind of mentions it to him. That's the thing that we'll kind of find out with Greg, is Greg will, at some point, if it's a joke or whatever, actually do it. And, Greg's just really happy-go-lucky. But this dog is something pretty crazy if y'all haven't seen it. That was actually one of the parts that, after I think the first airing of Over the Garden Wall, they actually had to cut it out because it was basically like too scary, I guess, for younger kids, as well as they cut it down, I think, for time and spliced it together as an Over the Garden Wall movie. That's what they presented it as, instead of the miniseries that it's supposed to be. And from that, they actually had a lot of the other stuff that was added into this for us to enjoy, as well as a cool little tidbit that I found out, that all the phases of the moon in this actually were supposed to correspond with the night that all of these episodes started coming out. So if you watch the episode on the night when it was supposed to come out, it was actually supposed to look like the moon at that time, or the phase of the moon at that time. So that was a cool little tidbit that I found out about this as well. All right, so Greg lures this big dog back into the house, and it tries to get a hold of them. In the same vein of thought, the woodsman comes in trying to help them out, and right at that moment, Greg knocks him unconscious, because that was something that they kind of had talked about earlier when they were talking about escaping away and getting away from the woodsman, as well as just trying to find their way back home instead of what he's talking about. So this dog thingy tries to chase them around the house. Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty. But this dog chases them into the actual mill part too, as well as basically smashing it up and making it unfunctionable at this point. And them getting to the point where they end up climbing up out on top of the roof of the mill, and this dog jumping through the roof of it as well, trying to get them. Greg takes the rest of the candy he's got, throws it over the side. This thing jumps over them, trying to get at it, and thus falls into where the mill and the or both the parts of the mill come together, and a rock, and it actually forces and starts eating this thing through kind of the cog shape of it, and forces this thing to come out of it, which we find out later on was one of the turtles, which is the turtle that Greg had put the piece of candy on at the very beginning of the episode. And a dog that we saw with a girl in a blue dress in one of the little mini things, that it's the same dog. So somehow this dog and all of this is related. And we do find out that also upon further inspection with the things in the mill, that there are bags of like flour or like seed or something, and each one has another like little company logo on it, and actually has a bluebird on it. So somehow it's related to this bluebird character that we've met. We don't know a name for this person yet, but that's something that will come in the next episode. But we do have more of all this stuff, them getting away from the woodsman, trying to find their own way back home, and really just trying to plan everything out with what they're going to do, because they can't very well do very much with what's left to them. So Greg and Wirt trying to continue on their way and see what they can do about it, because obviously Wirt feels like the woodsman is no help to them. So to round up the end of this episode, we find out that the mill is now completely screwed up, completely damaged due to the attack, and the mill, the water wheel of the mill basically taking out this dog has totally and completely destroyed it, virtually beyond repair, and that the woodsman has basically tasked both of them to do different things. For Wirt, he actually tells him, hey, you're the older brother, you're supposed to make sure you take care of the younger one. Any things that happen from his decisions are actually inadvertently things for your decisions. You know, you're the one that everything falls on. If Greg screws up, you screw up, basically, because of the elder child thing. We also have where he tells them that they basically need to fear the unknown, fear what's out there, because you don't want to stay here too long, as well as don't try and figure out the beast. You need to get away from him, and just to all together leave the woods, because they are not a place for these children to be here. And then we also kind of had this little scene, which I'm not exactly sure about the woodsman talking to Greg directly, but he says that he needs to find the frog a name, which is kind of an ongoing joke throughout the entire series. Greg is randomly naming off different names for this frog, so I'm not exactly sure what that whole part is supposed to be about. If there's a big part where we need to worry about this frog having a name, or if it even matters, or is he just trying to kind of console Greg to an extent for him to have fun on this journey and stay positive, I guess. Maybe he's given him like some kind of a task or whatever to not be consumed by the beast. We do know that basically people that lose hope or something like that are actually consumed by the beast's dark powers, which is also another thing. You know, all around him is complete shadow, so it's a little weird having part of the other stuff in this episode where it's so light and everything, and as we go, it seems like it gets a little darker and darker and darker till the end. So, all right, so we're at the end. Basically, what I like about this episode is that it does kind of get us into this whole zone of being lost with Greg and Wirt. There's not too much that we can really find out, but we do kind of get that like animal companion thing besides the regular, two-person companion thing with most tales that we read or enjoy or whatever, and there's always like an animal companion, so that's kind of where the frog comes into play. Everything in it is kind of like a big joke though, and some of it leaves you questioning like why there's a metal tea kettle on top of Greg's head. We don't really know too much about it, and why some of the things are how they are. The things with Beatrice, which is the bluebird. We'll meet her next episode, as I've said before, and what everything for the unknown goes to, because obviously there's a lot of different stuff. Especially with the introduction of the Edelwood trees and the introduction of the creature with the black turtles or anything that is affected by the black turtles. I would reckon to say maybe just a fan theory or whatever that the turtles are actually very magical to some extent, because it seems like almost every time we see the turtles, there's always something, maybe like a harbinger, a messenger of death almost, or a messenger of like misfortune that the turtles are. The only thing I've ever, or that we've actually seen or will see, is there are other magic beings that are in the world that the turtles don't affect. So I kind of wonder if that's a thing, if that was a way that they were going with this, maybe, or not. We do have the woodsman, as well as this. I find it really comforting that we do have some of the voice actors are actually people that we've heard here and there. I think the voice actor for Greg, has actually been in other Cartoon Network shows, as well as the one for Wirt was actually in Lord of the Rings, which is something I grew up with. It was the actor that played Frodo Baggins, as well as the other guy, which plays the woodsman. That was Doc Samson from Back to the Future. He's also been in The Page Master, a bunch of other stuff. So we do have those. I'm really bad with names, if you've guessed it or not. But we do have some of the voice actors or actors and stuff that I think do bring unique voices and stuff to the characters as we go through them, as well as the uniqueness of the characters. If you haven't seen it before, we'll just do a character like breakdown. Like the woodsman is like in a completely black outfit with like a big top hat. So his is kind of weird for being an actual woodsman. You would think more of like a lumberjack. Greg's wearing green overalls with this tea kettle on top of his head turned upside down. And Wirt kind of has like this nice, I feel like it's almost like an Amish getup on. But he's got almost like a dunce hat that's sticking straight up in the air without the D on it. And then kind of like this weird blue, looks like military shawl with a red lining on the inside. But not only that, through the episode, we've also gotten a lot of stuff that Wirt has said under his breath. So we know he's very smart. We know that he's into poetry, and he also enjoys music. That he must be like in band or something like that, as well as a couple other things. He's very solemn when it comes to talking in kind of like sing-songy type things, and just enjoying it, as well as we also find out too that he's kind of like your average, I guess, high schooler. But there's just a lot of funny things that we see with this. We do see one of the very beginning things. We haven't seen him pull it out yet, but we know that Greg has this rock with a face drawn on it and everything that he will present to us, these rock facts, which are at times kind of funny. I really enjoy those. And all the random BS names that he tries to give his frog. So, I don't know. So, but we do have that. We have the woodsman tell them where they need to go to avoid the beast. So, this big black dog wolf thingy that they had this episode wasn't the beast. So, obviously the beast has to be like 10 times worse than this possessed dog. And just kind of getting into the rest of it of where we're supposed to go and what we're actually supposed to understand about the unknown, as well as will Wirt and Greg and the frog get out of this, because there may not be a way to, or there may be a path that they need to take that's a lot better. Who exactly knows? So, anyway, thanks for listening. I'm Jen of the Otakuology Podcast. I hope you will listen to some of our other shows. And as always, see you next Tuesday. Bye.